I thank Senator McCain for his leadership as the ranking Republican on the Armed Services Committee, and no one knows these issues better in the United States Senate, I would say, than John McCain. And so it's an honor to be here with him, and also my colleague Senator Thune, who I serve with on the Budget Committee and who's been very, very concerned about the impacts of sequestration on our national security. And I call this sequestration the biggest national security threat that you've never heard of. And the American people need to know this threat to their national security, to the protection of our country, which is our fundamental responsibility under the Constitution. So I fully support the amendment that Senator McCain has brought forward on the Farm Bill, that he championed along with Senator Levin on the defense authorization, because we can't afford to keep hiding the details of what will happen to our Department of Defense and our military if sequestration goes forward. And just to be clear, as Senator Thune has already identified, the Department of Defense is taking significant reductions. In the proposed 2013 budget from the President, the Department will take approximately $487 billion in reductions over the next 10 years. That already means a reduction of approximately 72,000 of our Army, a reduction of 20,000 of our Marine Corps. But what we're here talking about today is an additional $500 to $600 billion in reductions coming in January of 2013 that the American people need to know about, and our Department of Defense should clearly identify what is going to happen with those reductions. But here's what we do know. As Senator McCain and Senator Thune have already talked about, our Secretary of Defense has warned that these cuts will be devastating, that they'll be catastrophic, that we would be shooting ourselves in the head if we did this for our national security, that we'd be undermining our national security for generations. And this is what it means, what our service chiefs have told us so far about the preliminary assessments of sequestration. For our Army, what they have said is an additional 100,000 reduction in our Army, 50% coming from the Guard and Reserve, on top of the 72,000 coming in the proposed 2013 budget. Yes, that would result in our ground forces being back to the level of 1940 before World War II. For our Navy, our current fleet is 285, and the Navy has said previously that we need 313 ships. What the Navy has said, their preliminary assessment is, if sequestration goes forward, that our fleet will have to shrink to between 230 to 235 ships. And at a time when China is investing more and more in a Navy, where we have shifted our defense focus on our latest national security strategy to the Asia-Pacific region, it would make that shift in strategy a mockery, truthfully, if we allowed sequestration to go forward. And we've heard the same from our Marine Corps. What the Marine Corps has said about sequestration, every member of Congress should be concerned about and wake up, because the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps has said that if sequestration goes forward, it's an additional 18,000 reduction in our Marine Corps, and that the Marines would be incapable of conducting a single major contingency operation. Think about it. The Marine Corps of the United States of America incapable of responding to a single major contingency operation. This is at a time when the threats to our country have not diminished. This is at a time when we still have men and women, as we sit here today, who are serving us admirably in Afghanistan. And by the way, OMB has already said that the OCO, or war funding, will not be exempt from sequestration, and that's at risk as well. We owe it to our men and women who are in the field right now to make sure that they have the support that they need and deserve from this Congress. And when we look at where we are, this is not just about our national defense, but you would think that being about our national defense, Our foremost responsibility in Congress would be enough to bring everyone to the table right now to resolve this, regardless of whatever your party affiliation is. But this is also an issue about jobs, because the estimates are, in terms of the job impact in this country, a George Mason University study estimates that over 1 million jobs will be lost in this country over 1 year over the sequestration issue. And that's just looking at research and development and procurement. Well, let's talk about some of the states that will be impacted, because every one of my colleagues represents a state in this chamber that will be impacted by the jobs, that issue. We look at where our economy is right now, and yet we continue not to address this fundamental issue of sequestration when 1 million jobs are at stake. For Virginia, the estimate is 123,000 jobs. Florida, 39,000 jobs. Ohio, 18,000 jobs. North Carolina, 11,000 jobs. Connecticut, 34,000 jobs. Pennsylvania, 36,000 jobs. In my small state of New Hampshire, it's projected that we lose 3,300 jobs. So that's a conservative estimate. So not only is this an issue of our national security, but we're talking about our defense industrial base. And once we lose much of the talent in that industrial base, it doesn't necessarily come back. We have many small employers that can't sustain these cuts and will go bankrupt and won't be able to come back. And once they're gone, we lose their expertise. In fact, the CEO of Lockheed Martin has said recently, the very prospect of sequestration is already having a chilling effect on the industry. We're not going to hire. We're not going to make speculative investments. We're not going to invest in incremental training, because the uncertainty associated with $53 billion of reductions in the first fiscal quarter of next year is a huge disruption to our business. And to my colleagues who think that we can kick this can down the road till after the elections, please understand that when it comes to jobs, these defense employers have a responsibility under federal law, what is called the WARN Act, to notify their employees if they're going to be laid off at least 60 days before a layoff will occur. And what that means is that there could be hundreds of thousands of WARN Act notices going out, likely before the election in November, letting members of people across this country know that they may lose their job because Congress has not come forward and addressed this fundamental issue to our national security right now. So in conclusion, I fully hope, and I know that Senator Thune is supportive of this, I'm the co-sponsor of a bill along with Senator McCain and others that comes up with savings to deal with the first year of sequestration. And I would ask every member of this chamber, let's sit down and resolve this. We do need to cut spending, and we should find these savings. It's important to deal with our debt, but let's make sure that we find savings that don't devastate our national security or undermine our national security for generations or hollow out our force, as our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has said about sequestration. And I would urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, let's sit down now and resolve this issue on behalf of our most important responsibility, which is to protect the American people from the threats that still remain around the world and are very real. We have seen it with Iran trying to acquire the capability of a nuclear weapon. It still remains a very challenging time, and we need to protect our country from the threats that we face. And so I thank my colleague, Senator Thune, and I turn it back to him and thank him.